But because the Palestinians elected the so-called the wrong people, everybody was punished. And we were the first people under occupation to be sanctioned, to be boycotted. This did not weaken Hamas. This punished the Palestinians. This strengthened Hamas because now it's perceived as a victim. It did not have the opportunity to govern. Not only that, it also made it very difficult for the Palestinian opposition to exercise its democratic right to oppose Hamas, because already Israel and the US and Europe have decided to usurp the role of the opposition. So what does this do to democracy or to the American exportation of the democratic revolution? So this created a situation also of extreme polarization. The Fatah sense of entitlement and its lack of will or ability to relinquish power, and Hamas's inability to create a system of governance, and we have to face this, both victimized the Palestinian people. In Gaza, when Hamas resorted to violence, now there is a clear split. We have an extreme polarization between Gaza and the West Bank, between Hamas and Fatah or the PLO. And it's the people who are paying the price. This is a power struggle of the worst kind because they're fighting over non-existent power. And that's why most Palestinians are saying a pox on both their houses, are quite upset. But clearly, the Palestinians also do not take kindly to any kind of oppressive system that confiscates their freedoms and their rights. We do not take kindly to the burning or banning of books. We do not take kindly to censorship or to the blowing up of internet cafes. We do not take kindly to the intimidation or the use of weapons against civilians. So there has been, in a sense, a battle over the soul of Palestine. And we feel that we've gone back to the traditional Arab polarization between a corrupt, inept national system and an extremist or ideological Islamist opposition. It's the democratic forces, the pluralistic nature of Palestine that must be safeguarded and that must move. That will be the salvation, I think. Palestine must be restored as a cause of justice, integrity, liberation, and self-determination, not a question of charity and relief and so on. And of course, we must heal the rift democratically. There is no military solution to domestic realities in Palestine. Nobody can defeat the other. In the same way as we say there is no military solution to the Palestinian-Israeli or Arab-Israeli conflict. There is no military solution internally. Resorting to violence is criminal in Palestine. It must be done by democratic means, and there must be a consensus to have new elections. But without consensus, we cannot have elections, unfortunately. And we must activate the national institutions, whether the parliament, the PLC, and others, as well as the judiciary. We must not be part of the attempt at the dissolution and the deconstruction or destruction of Palestinian institutions. And at the same time, we cannot make peace with part of Palestine. Now we have to make peace with all of Palestine and all the Palestinians. So we do need internal empowerment. Also, Israel must understand the limits of its own power. You cannot use military power to subdue a nation under occupation that is bent on getting its freedom. Now, to complete the circle and to conclude, we are now in the post-Annapolis era, as Mahmoud Abbas said. Again, I would advocate the triple-tiered approach to the post-Annapolis era. On the one hand, there must be policies to there must be attempts to deal with Israeli measures and policies on the ground, whether it is the siege that must be lifted, internal as well as external, the wall that must be stopped, the settlements, the land confiscation, the institutions of Jerusalem must be reopened. All the illegal measures that Israel has taken and has done must stop, including the incursions and the killings and the abductions, and there has to be a release of prisoners and probably a prisoner exchange with the abducted Israeli soldiers. This has to be done not as part of a negotiating process, and not, as they say, confidence-building measures, but as a right, as compliance with the law in order to create the proper atmosphere for genuine negotiations and to show that there is a commitment. The second tier also must proceed simultaneously, and Tony Blair is dealing with that, which is the economic reconstruction of Palestine. We do need an economic reconstruction. We do need to rebuild the institutions that have been destroyed. We do need the empowerment of Palestine. But both these cannot proceed without having the political legal framework. If there is no political legal, I'm not talking about a process, but I'm talking about an endeavor now that would adopt a comprehensive and integrated approach. You cannot use the first tier and the second tier in isolation of the political dimension. Certainly, we do have now a binding time frame. I hope it's binding, 2008. This is something that has to be tested. We have to have a workable plan of implementation. We do not need any more generalizations, statements of principle, defining the issues. We all know what they are. We need a work plan that is applicable, that can be implemented on the ground. We do not need any more transitions or phases, because we know from historical experience any transition, any phase is used by Israel to create facts on the ground that are detrimental to permanent status issues. So any unilateral measures must stop. No more transitions and phases. We must deal with the permanent status issues, as I said, in a comprehensive and integrated way, rapidly and decisively. We must not deal with what Tzipi Livni and Condi Rice talked about, the virtual state. We're not interested in a virtual state. When you build a state, you look at the territory, you look at the terrain, right? Those of you who are architects and engineers know there's no state hovering up in the air. We need a real state on the ground with the territorial dimension clearly delineated. And 67 boundaries are the minimal boundaries that can make a Palestinian state viable. Nor do we need shelf agreements, as, again, Olmert described them, that you can have agreements, okay, sign agreements, but don't implement them. Put them on the shelf. Wait till later to implement them. We need agreements that are applicable. We need monitoring and verification mechanisms. We need both mediation and arbitration. Even bilateralism does not work, frankly speaking, because of the asymmetry of power. Unilateralism doesn't work because it's power politics. Bilateralism doesn't work when you have one weak and one strong adversary or component. And of course, we need to have international legality, UN resolutions, and the Arab Initiative as being the foundations of any agreement. The post-Annapolis era must embody parity and justice, and must work towards mutual validation with assurances of identity. They must embody the principle of sharing rather than exclusivity or exclusion. Sharing the land should lead to a shared legitimacy and the prospect of a future shared narrative. And of course, this must be based on a redefinition of security, not in military terms, but in human terms, human security that is all-encompassing, which we can talk about later. It must affect a pervasive paradigm shift and weigh in favor of the right choices. This could signal, if this fails, it would signal the end of the two-state solution, frankly. And then the circle will complete itself in a self-destructive spiral. Because if the two-state solution is no longer possible, there will be a de facto one-state option, de facto, that will place us in perpetual conflict for a long time, or the solution could bring about the two states. It could mark the end of the secular nationalist movement and the dominance, and bring about the dominance of the Islamic political parties, therefore a new type of identity, not just for Palestine, but for the region. Or it could vindicate the search for an inclusive, tolerant democracy in Palestine. It could bring the whole region to new realities and new regional dynamics, which I'll talk about in 2 months' time. through the Arab Initiative and could unleash the forces and creativities of the region. Dear friends, 2008 promises to be a fateful year. December 12 launches the process again of Palestinian-Israeli negotiations. December 17th launches an economic nation-building endeavor in Paris, the Paris Conference. And a public promise was made at Annapolis to achieve peace by the end of 2008. Let's hope that all concerned will demonstrate the wisdom, the courage, and the will to do so. Thank you very much.